Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar hosted by iphysed.com and the PhysEd Library. I'm your host, Nathan Horn, and I am very proud to present to you today Frisbee Rob McLeod. Connected with Rob about a year ago. We recorded a podcast together where he shared some of his story about how he discovered Frisbee and the joy that it has brought his life. And since that time, I've been following Rob and all the amazing work that he's doing, trying to bring Frisbee into schools. I'm super excited about today's webinar, and I'm really looking forward to sharing Rob with you and having you learn about some ways that you can incorporate Frisbee into your teaching or coaching practice. Before we get started, I want to share a video that gives you a bit of background about Rob. You can sort of see the amazing things that he's been able to do with Frisbee, including setting Guinness World Records and becoming world champion in a number of different Frisbee disciplines. And then we'll jump straight into the webinar with Rob, where he'll share a little bit about the different disciplines of Frisbee and ways that you can use Frisbee in your school. So let's get down to learning.
So just a bit about me. There's just some really wonderful people I've met in Frisbee. I like to joke that my religion is Frisbeetarian, and we call ourselves Frisbeings. So there's a lot of really fun words that you can come up with, especially when you're inventing games and inventing throws. So something that I like to explain is that balls fall and Frisbees fly. And I like to say that when a ball dreams, it dreams that it's a Frisbee. And today, for the first time ever, a student in grade 7, I believe, she threw the Frisbee and the wind held it up in the air. And she said that it looked like the Frisbee was swimming in the air. So I've never heard anybody describe it quite like that, but I really like that. And so Frisbees can fly, or they can swim, through the air, through the wind, which is pretty cool. So history. So as long as there's been flying objects, Frisbee has existed. People pick things up, they throw them. The shot put, the discus. Discus doesn't work so well as a Frisbee. But since there's been ice cream lids, people would throw them. Pie tins. So the famous story is that the name Frisbee actually came from the Frisbee Pie Tin Company in Bridgeport, Connecticut. People would eat their pies and they'd throw it, say, throw me the Frisbee. And as you can see, the word Frisbee, Frisbie, was the name. And they named that to Frisbee, Bee. And it's just been really wonderful. So the original Frisbees made by Wham-O, they've evolved quite a bit. There's many different kinds of discs, which I'll talk about soon. But there's still some really good quality Frisbees that come from Wham-O that have really not changed in the last 40 years. I actually have some discs that I throw that are from the 70s. And it's pretty neat that they can still survive and be around that long. I mean, how many people still have a basketball or football from 40 years ago? One of the ways that they used to actually market the Frisbee was Fred Morrison would throw it to his wife. The Frisbee would fly through the air, and he would say that it's on an invisible string, because people just couldn't understand how it could actually fly like that. And even today, I'm reminded of that. When I'm showing the kids what's possible with Frisbee, they're saying, am I a wizard? Did I turn off the gravity? It's hard for them to actually understand what's happening when they actually watch a Frisbee fly, which I always find really amusing. And Whammo's famous slogan is to play, catch, invent games. It was printed on the underside of the original Frisbee. And that's really a slogan that I love using today, is just getting kids playing catch, inventing games, just having fun with a Frisbee. So the oldest Frisbee tournament in the world is the IFT, the International Frisbee Tournament. It's actually a Guts tournament in Michigan, and I'll explain what Guts is very shortly. And so Frisbee's been around for a very long time, and just really neat. People pick things up, they try and throw them, see what happens, evolve. There's a lot of science, a lot of physics involved, and it's just a really wonderful sport. Whether you're doing it just for fun, whether you want to do it professionally, as a phys ed teacher trying to introduce it to kids and getting them to explore things, you can tie Frisbee into a lot of different units as well, right, in science units. So global governance. So like I mentioned, I'm on the board of directors for WIFDF. So Federation of 93 member associations, the goal is to actually get to 100. Our big goal is to actually get in the Olympics. And so hopefully that will happen in the next, 2021, in the next 7 years, we're trying to get in the LA Olympics. So because of this, we have a lot of governance because we're at the IOC level. We were actually recognized by the IOC in 2015. And so along with that comes a lot of funding, but also comes a lot of rules and trying to figure out, are we a participant sport, a spectator sport? How do we promote this? How do we, market the sport? And being a collection of disc sports has been really amazing, actually. So you can think of Frisbee like track and field. And so there's people who love to run, but they don't love to throw. There's people who love to throw, don't love to run. People that like to jump, don't like to throw. So Frisbee is the same way. You have some people that love ultimate Frisbee. They may not be a great thrower, but they just love to run and jump and dive. Some people don't like to run, but they like to throw, so they can play disc golf. Some people have a dog, just like to throw to their dogs. Some people, like myself, love to throw and catch our own throw and just explore how the Frisbee can fly in the wind. And so there's really something for everyone. And so these are the three main sort of goals of WIFDF. And really it's just providing opportunities and getting more people playing. We've seen a lot of growth in Africa recently. And because of COVID, we've been able to do some really cool challenges online. People playing Frisbee in their rooms. So we call it the tiny room battle. So they're actually battling people all over the world doing tricks in their room. And it's been really interesting to watch the innovation happen. So these are the official flying disc disciplines. So if you think of track and field, right, you'd have 100 meters, 200, 400, 800, long jump, high jump, shot put, discus. So those would be the official disciplines. And so in Frisbee, these are all the official disciplines. So there's world championships for each one. I'm going to show you a video that walks through this a little bit, but just very quickly, accuracy. So you have a target, you throw through that. Beach ultimate, ultimate, typically on grass. We also have indoor ultimate. And so beach ultimate is its own discipline. It's slightly different. It's a smaller court, smaller field, so 5-on-5. Disc golf, I'll talk about that in a bit. Discathon, so you can think of it like a giant disc golf course. So you're running the course, throwing the Frisbee through trees and through obstacles, and you're trying to run it in as fast a time as possible. Distance, just try and throw it as far as you can. Double disc court, super fun game. It's like doubles tennis, except there's actually 2 discs in play. And so you're throwing it back and forth, trying to attack each other. It's really, really fun. And an alternate name for double disc court is actually escape, because you're trying to escape so you don't get scored on. Freestyle, so it's very similar to like freestyle football. You're doing tricks with a Frisbee, but because of the Frisbee, it's very different than a ball. So you can do a lot of different tricks that aren't possible with a soccer ball. Guts is the original Frisbee sport. It's like Red Rover. So you have 2 teams. One team throws a Frisbee at the other team as hard as they can. You have to try and catch it with one hand. So you stand up 45 feet apart. One team throws it. At the top level, the Frisbee's coming at you over 100 kilometers an hour. So it's a really, really fun game. Hasn't really taken off. It has good potential to be marketable. And so if there's some money coming into it, we'll see what happens. In Hong Kong, actually, I've been working with some of the organizers there with the Hong Kong Flying Disc Association. So they have introduced a sport called Dodge Disc. and they actually use a dodge B. And so dodge B is really fun because if you think of normal dodgeball, you throw back and forth. But dodge disc, you attack from all four sides. And so it really gets the kids looking around. And I did a Frisbee residency 2 weeks ago, so 5 days, so 4 classes for each grade. And of all the games we did, the classes that actually got to do dodge disc, that was their favorite game. It's super fast. You always have to be aware of things, and it doesn't hurt. You know, it's a soft foam Frisbee. It's designed so it does fly well, and I love it. My favorite to do is overall. So it's like a decathlon or a heptathlon in track and field. So the full overall is 7 events, and we typically do that over 6 or 7 days. It's a lot. But the overall champion is the one who gets the most points in all of the 7 events. So when I compete in the overall, I do okay, but my goal is to win distance and win self-caught flight. Those are my 2 events. So my favorite event is self-caught flight. 2 parts to it. So you throw the Frisbee, you have to run and catch it. One of them, we measure how long the Frisbee is in the air. The other, we measure how far from where you throw it to where you catch it. So that one's a really cool one because you're not really competing against other people. You're going against yourself. And it's something really interesting for kids. It's something that there are not a ton of world records for kids, actually, because not a lot of kids have attempted them. And so it's something where you can set school records, you could set, national records. Really gives you a good chance. We talk about, growth mindset, setting goals. Really, really good way to incorporate that into your curriculum. And then ultimate, we're also looking at wheelchair ultimate. And so it is slightly different. In order for a sport to be considered for the Paralympics, you can't just take a sport and then have people doing that sport in wheelchairs. You actually have to adapt the sport. And so there's potential, wheelchair ultimate, wheelchair disc golf, different things like that we're looking into. So those are the official disciplines recognized by WIFDIF with world championships and all of them. But the cool thing is there are hundreds of Frisbee games. And so, play volleyball with a Frisbee, you can call it volleybee. Play baseball with a Frisbee, call it frisball or basebee. And so it's really fun because you get just kids exploring and thinking and trying about different ways to come up with games. You could take a game that exists out of Frisbee, you could just have them make up a brand new game. And so that's really where the idea of a lot of these came from, is people just made them up, and the rules evolved over time, and they are what they are today. Most of these have been around for 40 plus years, some of them a little longer. And so yeah, those are the official ones. So we're going to watch this video. I'm thinking maybe we just leave it on mute if possible, or maybe Nathan, if you could use.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can leave it on mute for sure.
I could just even mute that myself here.
Yeah.
So this is just going to show you a bit about disc golf. And so I just wanted to talk about it a bit. So Paul Macbeth, who's that guy right there, he just signed a contract. So he is a 5-time world champion in disc golf. He just signed a contract. So he's now being paid $1 million a year for the next 10 years. So first millionaire disc golfer. And part of that comes from sales of discs. Part of it comes from just, his popularity, how well he does. And sometimes you'll see disc golf courses on a golf course. And so the sand traps and the greens are actually out of bounds. There's actually a tournament going on this weekend in Portland, Oregon, in the US on a golf course. And so it's really interesting just to see how they modify it. But just really interesting watching discs fly. I grew up my entire life playing golf. Frisbee, I just find a bit more interesting. So this is on a pier in Santa Cruz, California. Someone threw a hole-in-one in front of about 5,000 people. This putt he needed to make because if this guy makes this putt, he forces a playoff. So, really high tension, high stress. These guys, this is their full-time job. This is the most viewed disc golf video of all time. It was on ESPN, tons of Sports Center channels. That's a 2 on a par 5. This is a putt. If he misses the putt, definitely going to go out of bounds on the road. This was one of the most impressive hole-in-ones ever. This is just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Skips it off the ground up into the basket. And so getting a hole-in-one in disc golf is a lot easier than in golf. I have friends that have over 100 hole-in-ones. That one, she bounced it in off the tree. And it's not confirmed, but apparently the top female disc golfer makes more than the top professional basketball player in the WNBA. So there's money for men, there's money for women. You're seeing more and more of that happening, which is really exciting. Especially during COVID, there's been a lot more people playing and exploring and discovering the sport.
I'll just add, I think I've just sort of discovered disc golf in the last couple of months, like since we installed the course in our school. And then I've since found like 2 other courses that are like, one's 5 minutes from my house and the other one's like 20 minutes from my house. And like pretty much every weekend now, like I take my kids, I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and like they love just like walking around the course and like throwing the discs. And like, yeah, I think it's all the great things that you enjoy about playing golf in like a fraction of the time and pretty much for free. Like you buy the discs cost. And like it's, most courses you're not paying to go and play. Like it's like the one that's 5 minutes from my house here is just in the forest that's just down the street. So like it's great. I love it. And I think I've been talking to lots of kids who are now really into it at our school, and they're saying like, where else can I go and play? Like when the school's closed on the weekend, where can I go? And it's so accessible.
Love it. This is this is the Canadian and US junior teams playing against each other at Worlds. So these are some of the highlights. So N. Kolakavich, he's actually from Vancouver and is a really well-known videographer. So being on WIFTIF, I get to go to a lot of these events, and it's just really cool being there with thousands of athletes, thousands of spectators. Ultimate's a tough sport to promote and market. There's a lot of potential with disc golf because people buy a lot of discs. With Ultimate, we're trying to get ESPN, SportsCenter, things like that. We're trying to get on there, but trying to get sponsors, it's been a challenge for sure, just because traditional media is a little different with sports sponsorships. And, you look at basketball, football, there's a lot of money in TV deals there, even though, social media things are happening. So we're trying, but Ultimate is amazing. That's how I got started in Frisbee, played it for about 10 years, and it can take a toll on your body. So typically you don't see a lot of people playing Ultimate sort of into their 40s. And that's where that transition can happen with disc golf or freestyle or just playing catch. So really, when you think of the ageless game, it's really wonderful. And Ultimate's awesome. What makes Ultimate a bit different from most sports is that there are actually no referees at the highest level. So even at this level, there'd be no referees. And so these kids would actually be making their own foul calls. So it's really interesting. We call it spirit of the game. It keeps people accountable. It encourages you to just take a second and think, right? As we talk about emotional intelligence, you could very easily make a call that would benefit your team, but that's against the spirit of the game, and it's really discouraged. So freestyle Frisbee. So these 2 are amazing. On the left in the red is Daniel. He has performed at Cirque du Soleil. And James is the #1 freestyler in the world currently and possibly of all time. And so what they're trying to do here, this is a bit of speed flow. So trick catches, trick throws. And then so the Frisbee is actually spinning the entire time. So when he's tipping it, the Frisbee keeps going because it's still spinning. They're doing what's called nail delays. So super technical, really, really challenging. And it's just an amazing sport because you can see they're doing it in a small space. And so I actually got to go to Budapest in 2019 for the World Urban Games. And so there was 6 sports there. We actually shared a space with 3-on-3 basketball, which is in the Olympics. And so freestyle in a small space is possible. Would not have been possible to do disc golf or Ultimate there. And there was parkour, there was breakdancing, there was inline freestyle and BMX freestyle. And so 3 of those 6 sports were in the Olympics already, and really put us on a really cool stage. And Daniel actually won the World Urban Games with his partner, Emma. Emma's Ultimate player and also does a lot of freestyle, lives in Seattle. This is Guts. This is the one where people throw it at each other as hard as they can. Typically, they're not catching it right away. They're tipping it up in the air, and then the whole team has to try and go catch it. You're going to see some really interesting throws as well. So it's a very calculated sport, and it's a bit of a curveball almost. It's just amazing what people can do. And it started off in Michigan. Michigan is still the most popular place to play Guts. I was fortunate enough to actually be part of this event. And
so is the aim there, Rob, to like have it land on the other side there in that past those cones?
Yeah, so it has to cross the line. If it's short of the line, then the non-throwing team gets a point. And so the goal is to try to throw it at the weakest person. And so if you're playing Guts and they're throwing at you all the time, either you're not a good thrower, or you're not a good catcher. That's why they keep throwing it at you. And if you're never getting thrown at, then it means you're a good catcher or a good thrower. And
so the person that ultimately catches it in the end, that's the one that has to throw it back?
Yeah. So whoever catches it or the first touch has to throw it back. And so sometimes you might be playing and you never get to throw it back because they're never throwing it at you. You can see they tip it up and then a nice catch here. So a really fun game I play with kids is the tip game. So I'm having all the kids, bobbling the Frisbee, trying to tip it up. Someone mentioned, freestyling. So you could do a ton of different stuff at home in a small space. I do freestyle every single workshop I do. Kids love it. They're trying to brush the Frisbee, twirl it on their finger, roll it off their body. A lot of things possible with freestyle. And then this is dog disc. So it's not an official discipline, but it's something that most everybody has a dog or knows somebody with a dog. And so there's a lot of really fun things you can do. That's my friend Chuck, who's 12-time world champion. Just an amazing, amazing Frisbee thrower. He does freestyle, so he'll actually have dogs jumping off of his body, doing tricks with dogs. So this is just showing you some catches from a toss and fetch competition in Texas. I was fortunate enough to actually go down and attend this event. That's my specialty. I throw really far, the dogs run and try and catch it. And you can just see how much they love it. Works their mind, keeps them active and healthy. Really amazing connection with the handler. And sometimes they don't catch it, but they try really hard. And so there's a lot of ultimate players who get offended when people ask, oh, no, I don't throw to my dog. That's me throwing. But it's actually really amazing. And it's just super fun. This dog actually deflects it with his feet, not on purpose, and then ends up tracking it down and catching the disc. And they love it. They bring it back to you. So it's a really fun way to get people into Frisbee. You see a lot of sort of 40 plus playing, doing dog disc, but we're seeing more kids getting into it. And part of it is you're also teaching that accountability, right? So they're actually training their dog and doing a lot of work with their dog. So this is a graphic I developed. It was based off of the Sport for Life physical literacy model. And so it talked about if you can throw, and then it talked about, baseball, football, lots of different throwing sports. And so I just adapted it to Frisbee. So if you can throw, you can play every single disc sport. Doesn't matter what you play, it involves you throwing. Not every disc sport involves running, and not every disc sport involves catching. I remember in 2013, I believe it was, I was in Santa Barbara for an overall tournament. And the way that they had designed the 7 events and scheduled the 7 events, we didn't actually catch a Frisbee for the first 2.5 days because we played disc golf for like the first 2 days. We did distance, we did accuracy. We weren't catching a Frisbee at all. We were just throwing. So very possible to develop physical literacy. And again, the nice thing about this as well is if you have a bunch of baseball players, a bunch of softball players, a bunch of football players, the throwing mechanics from Frisbee translate very well over to those sports as well. And you're just getting different muscles, different ideas about it. There's a lot of really fun games you can play that can help people who are fencing, people in track and field, basketball players, field awareness, spatial awareness, a lot of really amazing ways that you can have fun with it. I just did a workshop with a bunch of hockey players a couple of days ago. And so them running down, tracking the Frisbee, looking around, it's going to help them next time they're on the ice, just being more aware of where the puck is, where the other players are. So just something in here. So there's different targets. So yourself, you can do freestyle on your own. You can catch your own throw. You can throw a Frisbee to a friend, to a dog, at a target, for distance, or at someone else. And again, different skills in other sports. So if you've, grown up playing baseball, you get into Frisbee, it doesn't take you very long usually to translate that over. And I really do encourage people in general, kids in general. Frisbee is a lot of fun. I didn't actually start playing Frisbee until after high school. And so a lot of the skills that I learned playing other sports when I was younger translated into Frisbee. And so I think there's a lot of value in Frisbee, but sometimes the challenge with something like disc golf, if your friends aren't playing it, you're doing it by yourself, you're missing out on a lot of that social activity. Disc golf will always be there. For a lot of kids, it's their only chance to play competitive basketball, volleyball, hockey. It's when they're younger, right? We have these early specialization sports. And so I've done a lot of work with different schools and different programs. And if you're, 14, 15 years old, it's almost too late for you to get into some of these sports. And so I really encourage people to try as much as they can. And I know when I was in high school, actually, we were only allowed to play one sport a season. So I couldn't even do hockey all the time. I had to do hockey, soccer, track and field, and rugby. And I really like that they had those boundaries set up for me. And then if you want to specialize later, there's a lot of value in that for sure. But Frisbee can provide a lot of these, benefits. So I can definitely get into this more. I won't spend too much time on it today, but there's different types of discs. And so if you want to buy one disc for your school, for your kids, for your, whatever program you're involved with, a good multi-purpose disc is one you can play catch with, right? If you buy a golf disc, you can't play catch with that golf disc. An ultimate disc is good for ultimate, but it's really heavy for younger kids. So I really discourage that for schools that have, kindergarten to grade 5. My favorite is the Extra 235. That's what I use in schools. This disc is also a good disc. This is called a Fastback from Whammo. So they're very light. They're inexpensive. So you can get them for like $10, and they're good for throwing and catching. So are golf discs better for disc golf than a throw and catch disc? Absolutely. But when you're starting off, most of it is just learning how to throw and catch and have fun with it. So like I talked with the phys ed teacher today, they're not going to go buy 5 kinds of discs. And so for them to get one kind of disc, I gave them 30 actually today that you can use for throwing and catching for ultimate for disc golf. And if they want to get more serious into some of them, then they can for sure. The X disc is a lot of fun. It used to be called the Pure disc. So it's like a giant fidget spinner. Kids can spin it on their finger. There's also mini discs. So some people are really into mini disc golf. You can play that indoors. You can play that in a playground, small space. Double disc court and guts actually have a specific disc that you use. You definitely do not want to be throwing an ultimate disc when you're playing guts. That would break hands and be very dangerous. So yeah, just something to think about if you're not sure what to get for your school, where to buy them. I do my best to connect schools with the right manufacturers. And most of the time, like 90% of the time, I make no money off of it at all. My goal is to just get discs in your hands. And it's just not worth my time to try and go through all the different channels and be the middle guy. So I really just will probably connect you with somebody. And depending on the country you're in as well, it's very expensive to ship Frisbees. And so if you're not in North America, there's probably a manufacturer or a supplier close to you that's better to have that good relationship with. One of the challenges with the catalogs that phys ed school or phys ed classes or teachers will have is that the discs in there are not always the best quality. And so if you're throwing a disc that does not fly very well, it's most likely the disc, not the person. And so there's a lot of kids, and there's 130,000 schools in the United States, and I estimate a large number of them do not have quality discs. And so there's millions of kids who their first experience with Frisbee is not really a lot of fun because they're throwing a disc that's not very good, and they think they're not very good at Frisbee, when in fact it's just they don't have a good quality disc, right? So you have some promo companies that are making discs for 10 cents. They sell them for $1, right? But if they made that disc for $1 and sold it for $3, it'd be a lot better. So a lot of this is just awareness and education, which has been a bit of a challenge for sure. So just a couple of things. I mentioned a few of these already. Something a lot of people don't know about is, so Finland is a really big hockey country. I think their junior team actually finished ahead of Canada a couple of years ago. And disc golf is actually more popular in Finland than hockey. A recent estimate put it close to a million people in Finland have tried disc golf, which is significant because there's only 6 million people in Finland. So to think that, about 20% of the entire country has tried disc golf is pretty amazing. A big thing this year is manufacturers are low on supply because there's so many people buying discs. Frisbee is the #1 selling toy of all time. I found a stat that said something like 300 million, but that was a while ago. There maybe even close to 1 billion have been sold. It's unbelievable. I have 1,000 Frisbees myself. I have a friend that has 40,000 Frisbees. The average Frisbee player, and I'm including disc golfers, ultimate players, probably have 30 or 40 discs. So it's you buy a couple, you buy a couple more, you buy a couple more. So we're trying to get Frisbee in the 2028 LA Olympics. Probably going to be ultimate Frisbee, but with the trajectory of disc golf, it might be disc golf. Really just depends on, how much space they actually provide for us to do it. It might be freestyle. We'll see how freestyle continues. So a lot of new growth of freestyle in Africa. And with the tiny room battle all over the world, we're seeing a lot more kids getting into it as well. And then, like I mentioned, dog disc is gaining a lot of momentum. So Flying Disc Week, this is what I'm going to quickly go through. I have the entire curriculum that I can provide the PDF for, so I'm not going to get super deep into it. But just to give you an idea of what Frisbee could look like at your school, and you don't have to do all of them, but if you think of track and field, right, most likely you're not just going to do 100 meters and that's it. You're probably going to show all your students what's possible with track, and then they can kind of pick and choose what they really enjoy. And that's really the goal, I think, with Frisbee, is to show people what's possible with Frisbee. I did, it was called Sport Hub. It was a program that was developed out of Ireland, and we brought it to Calgary a couple years ago. So we introduced Frisbee to 800 kids. Then we had an after-school ultimate Frisbee program, and 40 kids showed up to that. And so if we would have introduced ultimate to 800 kids and we had 40 show up, then there would have been, 760 kids that did not know what was possible with Frisbee. So the nice thing about doing that is you show them what's possible. And a lot of this depends on volunteer. We know, teachers being involved, having an adult as a coach. If we would have had 200 kids show up after school, there would have been no way we could have done it. We just didn't have the resources. And so 40 kids was a perfect amount for 2 coaches. So just something to think about is, what do you actually want to run? And so what we recommend, and this is something that was developed kind of just before COVID, so we haven't really had a chance to test it out and get it into schools. Something I had a big part in developing, and I'm working on a bunch of other things as well, different apps, and just trying to figure out how to get more programming in schools. So I recommend starting off with module 1, which is all about throwing and catching to get that foundation. And then you can run 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or all of them. It just really depends on how much time you have. So this could be something that you do a couple days, you do it for a couple weeks. Really just depends on the time, on the space you have. And then some of the next steps I'll talk about is starting a Frisbee club at your school. Like Nathan mentioned, they have a disc golf course at their school as well. So if you have the space, you don't even need a disc golf basket. You could use poles, pipes, targets, cones, whatever. Some schools use hula hoops. So it's really accessible. And if you have a budget, great. You can partner with a local organization that might even sponsor some baskets. You can get portable baskets. You can move them around. You can actually install baskets in the ground. So throwing and catching, just kind of quickly go through this. So there's more than 150 ways to throw a Frisbee. A lot of people don't realize just how many things are possible with a Frisbee because of the shape. A Frisbee is part gyroscope. So it's super important to put a lot of spin on the Frisbee. It's also part parachute and part wing. And so it will fly through the air. So you need some power on it. But you put a lot of spin on it, it's going to actually get a lot of glide. And so a lot of this is just exploring the Frisbee that you have, how to throw it, how to manipulate it through the air, and just what's possible with it, which is really what I love. Catching, top and bottom, some people call it a pancake. Rim catch is hamburger catch. And so, it's a lot of fun with the younger kids. You can talk about how a Frisbee is like the wheel on a car. Your hands are like the brakes. You're just trying to stop it from spinning. And then there's a lot of really fun throwing and catching games that you can get into. So you can have just playing catch with a partner. You can have the partners throwing it exactly how they catch it. They can invent a throw. Each kid could have a Frisbee and they both throw at the same time. You could give 2 Frisbees to one kid. They throw 2 back and the partner has to try and catch 2. And you could also do the speed flow challenge. So speed flow, I used to do this a lot more in the beginning. Now I sort of give it to schools when I leave. But speed flow, you try and see how many catches you can get in 1 minute. So something super fun because you can activate the entire school. You can have grade level winners. I've seen, it was 2 girls in grade 7 or 8, and they got over 100 catches in a minute. It was super, super fast. So you figure out how far apart you want them to stand. You can give them points for trick catches, but just a lot of really fun ways to explore. And so if you're coaching ultimate, a great way to get your kids just having fun with throwing and catching, because that's really the biggest thing I find is a lot of kids just want to run. They want you to throw it, or they just want to play games. And then they're not building that foundation of the throwing and the catching, which is so important. And the better they can get at throwing and catching and really enjoy it, I think the longer you'll be able to keep them engaged and involved. And the more they'll want to try with it, the more they'll want to explore Frisbee, because nothing quite like watching a Frisbee actually fly through the air. So throw, run, and catch. This is a module that we developed. We were looking at actually making this its sort of own game. If you're familiar with punt, kick, and pass, drive, chip, and putt, throw, hit, and run, that they did baseball. So it's a way to introduce each sport. So we looked at throw, run, and catch. And so with the throwing, we talk about target throwing. If you do this in your gym, you can use a basketball net. If you have a disc golf basket, cones, hula hoops. So you're just trying to measure, your students throwing it. Run. So Battle Royale is a super fun tag game. So some other places call it pizza game or pizza tag. You have the Frisbee upside down in your hand, and you have to try and knock other people's Frisbees off their hands. You could do a 1v1 battle. So it's kind of like fencing. Really, really good way to develop that physical literacy. And a nice thing about all of this is you might have a kid who's really good at throwing. You might have a kid who's good at catching. You might have a kid who's good at running. So it really gives kids a chance to explore and find out where they might shine, or a place where they can actually get to explore a bit more. And then with catch, you can do, like I mentioned, speed flow, or you can do a bit of a creative catch. And so there's a lot of ways to catch as well, behind your head, behind your back, under your leg, under the opposite leg. A lot of different ways to explore. And so that's module 2. Module 3 is disc golf. So really important to introduce the etiquette. One thing that's happening, and it's a bit surprising, but we're seeing as more people are starting to play disc golf for the first time, especially during COVID, a lot of litter on the course. People are leaving garbage everywhere. People are not respecting other people. There's people getting hit with discs, walkers getting hit with discs. And so it's really important to just teach those etiquette rules to kids, and then they can hopefully, impart that on to their friends and their family. Because what's going to actually happen, and we've seen this a few places, is disc golf courses getting removed, right? If you think of golf, it's usually private, not really that big of a danger, but a lot of disc golf courses are in public parks. So you have to be very careful. You can work on putting with disc golf. So you can either throw it, we call it a spin putt, or you can basically push it when you're really close. And so there's a lot of really fun games you can do within that. Approaching, so just the idea of getting the Frisbee close. Again, you can use a disc golf basket, you can use pylons, you can use cones, setting up some target. Driving, so you can have kids trying to throw it in the air, or you can try and roll it on the ground. So the roller record, so I mentioned the world record for the longest throw is about 4 football fields. The longest roller ever is about 12 football fields. And so a roller is actually a good throw. In ultimate Frisbee, it's not a good throw because when it hits the ground, it's a turnover. But dogs love chasing rollers. And in disc golf, a roller sometimes is a really good throw, especially if you can't go over the trees, you have to go under the trees, or you have a low ceiling. And then for some games, Ring of Fire is a super fun game. You have a big circle around the basket. You can start off with just everyone getting into the rhythm. So one at a time, just like in golf, try and throw it in the basket. But Ring of Fire is when everybody throws at the exact same time. And so that's super fun. What I really love about these games as well is it's super easy to make them continuous. So I was actually at a school about 5 years ago and had a really good chat with a phys ed teacher who mentioned that part of their curriculum was not having elimination games. And I've noticed this. So when you have elimination games, kids just sit down and get bored. They lose interest. And so it's how do you inspire them, encourage them to keep playing continuous games? One thing that I also try and do is not punish them with exercise. I don't want to demonize exercise. And so if they do something like drop the Frisbee, don't make a throw, instead of making them do push-ups, I just do something that's super simple and easy. Then they get back in the game right away. And so it's been really interesting because in the beginning, I used to have them do a push-up. And I realized that they're doing a push-up when they do something negative. And so it's just trying to flip that around a little bit and make it fun for them. Ultimate. So, we call it module 4, but really you could do ultimate for 2 weeks. And so part of it is understanding that idea of spirit of the game. So actually getting kids understanding that, when you're fouling each other, you make the calls. And so having them actually practice that, which is really, really interesting. And it's really amazing to watch, 14, 15, 16-year-olds calling fouls and having those conversations, right? We talk about emotional intelligence. That's emotional intelligence at its finest. And so, knowing the rules is one thing, but being able to have conversations when you're in the heat of the game, your team winning or losing is on the line. So some of the rules, so just like in basketball, after you stop dribbling, when you have the Frisbee in ultimate, you cannot run with it. We want to try and avoid contact. And then there's actually a stall count. So it's kind of like the shot clock in basketball, except the players actually count it themselves. So whoever's defending the thrower. And a funny stat about the stall count. So they had a competition at a college tournament years ago. And the competition was who could accurately count to 10 seconds. And you had some kids that were counting 10 seconds and it took them 6 seconds. You had some kids counting 10 seconds and it took them 13 seconds. And so literally it's teaching people to count properly. Especially if you're breathing heavy, it's probably going to take you 13 or 14 seconds. And just an interesting thing there. And so At the highest levels, world championships, gold medal game, players are still counting stall counts. Really, really fascinating. Some of the games that you can play in Ultimate, a lot of times, actually all the time, I never actually do full games of Ultimate because if kids aren't very good at throwing, if there's some wind, if they're dropping a lot, then it's just turnover, and just can get really frustrating. So I do some smaller games like 2v2, 3v3. Kids love to run and catch. And so you can do a huck drill. So you have two kids running, you throw the Frisbee, they run and catch it. So again, just a lot of ways to simulate skills and elements of the game of Ultimate, but within, some really fun settings. So module 5 is freestyle. So something I get them to do. And it was really interesting because twirling it. So you're actually twirling it, on your finger. Tough with the mic here, but you're twirling it on your finger. And I also get them to twirl it upside down. And so one of the pieces that I bring into schools is talking about resiliency, the idea of I haven't done it yet, not giving up, keeping trying. And so the phys ed teacher, he actually was able to spin it upside down because every class he practiced. And so after 5 classes, he was able to get it. And then we had a kid in the last class in grade 8 who was able to get it after like 3 minutes. And so he went up to the phys ed teacher, was like, check this out. And so it's just neat, just being able to have, your staff involved, trying something that they're not very good at, showing the kids what it's like to not give up and that resiliency, and just practicing different tricks. And so, it's, when would you ever use twirling in disc golf or Ultimate, right? Probably never, but it's just something really fun to manipulate. Eye-hand coordination, strengthens your fingers. It's fun to do, something you can do in a small space. I do the twirling with pre-K, with kindergartens, grade 1s. So any age can actually do the twirling. And it's just really cool watching them pick it up and, challenging themselves to do it. Throwing and catching. So you can throw it under the leg. You can catch it under the leg. Throw and catch under the leg, throw behind the back, throw and catch behind the back. A lot of variations within that. You can also do brushing. So you're brushing the Frisbee, hitting it up, keeping it spinning. You can roll the Frisbee across your chest or your back. And then so if I'm at a school for multiple days, I usually will do twirling one day, throwing, catching the same day, maybe brushing, rolling the next day. And then you can also do combos. So just like skateboarding or snowboarding, you can actually combine tricks together. You could even do routines. And so if you do this long enough, you could even have each kid come up with their own routine. You could have partners with freestyle. You can have music, choreography. So that's at the highest level, but it's something that you can get them to do pretty quick, is to get some tricks together and see who can do the best combo.
I was just going to add something there. That's what I was thinking. I know this year at my school, we really tried to switch up and get away from dance because we just, a lot of schools, it's sort of like every year there's a dance unit and the kids like put together a dance performance, and like by the time the kids get to grade 5, grade 6, they're like, oh great, like time to put together another dance. So we went away from that in our middle school, and like our grade 6s did like jump rope, grade 8s did like poi spinning, grade 9s did like Diablos and devil sticks, but it's the same concept of still learn a new skill and then combining those skills together. So like, yeah, this freestyle thing could definitely be used in a school for in place of that sort of traditional dance unit. Yeah. Why not do it with a Frisbee? Like it's you're still hitting the same learning outcomes. You're still getting the kids to collaborate together and put a performance together, I guess. And you might actually find better engagement.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dance elements. And so one of the top freestylers in the world, he actually used to dance with Pelobolis. So Pelobolis does like the shadow dancing. So he was a part of that troupe for a while, and actually was a dance major in college. So he can bring a lot of those elements into freestyle, which is pretty amazing. A lot of strength and flexibility. And then, so module 6 is inventing games. You can include this on its own. If I'm at a school for multiple days, usually I just include this, sort of 10 minutes at the end. And so like I mentioned, tip game from Guts, you can just have the kids tipping, see how many times they can tip it and catch it. Eliminator, so every time they drop it, they lose an arm or a leg. I actually had a troop of Girl Guides invent this game, so that's been a lot of fun to play. So then you're working on balance, right? So if you drop the Frisbee, then you're sitting on one foot, you're still trying to throw it, catching with one hand. 500, people can do that with a football, with a baseball, with a Frisbee. Triangle toss, so you have 3 people, you throw it to someone, you run between them, they throw it to someone, you run. So it's a good way to get moving, just very quick. And then what's really fun, and I've done this if I have enough time, If I'm only at a school for a day, I don't do this, but 3 to 5 days I'll do this. So you can have groups of 2, groups of 4, groups of 6, whatever. And then they come up with a name for the game. They have to explain the game and the rules. You could even connect this into the Frisbee Club later. And so there's been some really wonderful games that kids have developed that have just come out from different ages. And it just gets their creative minds working. There's a lot of kids who play video games where it's just constantly being fed to them. They don't have to actually think about, game design and the rules. And so challenging them to do that. For some kids, it's super, super tough. And I even had a group of kids once say that it was boring. And I was like, well, you're making up the game. So if the game's boring, then change the game. Like, you're in complete control of it. So it's just really interesting to have that conversation and challenge them, change it up, adapt it. So one of the projects I'm working on, and this is something that when I leave schools, there's a lot of times been a disconnect. So I've been to about 400 schools. And so I go in, teach Frisbee. There's tons of energy and excitement. And then I leave, and then kids don't really know what to do. And so what I really want to try is to have actually a Frisbee club created at each school. So it's going to involve a teacher getting involved, an adult getting involved, usually just a couple of kids. But the biggest success, and it was before my idea of a Frisbee club, but I actually had a couple girls at a school. They were in grade 5. They started their own club. They ended up attempting some world records. They got on the local news. And it was really amazing. And then they went around the school. They were trying to get people to join the club. And it was mostly girls. And then when the boys heard that the girls were going to be attempting world records, like, all the boys wanted to sign up. So it's just really funny just how kids can get really excited about something that they didn't know existed. So you just give them a chance, give them some knowledge, and they can do a lot with it. So just as a final piece, connect with me if you'd like to build a disc golf course in your field or in your town. There's lots of amazing partnerships. So I would not be designing it. I would actually connect you with somebody locally that does this. I know people that can design it using Google Maps, but it's always better to have somebody come in, not only to help design the course, but to also connect with your school. And then you can build that relationship with the local disc golf or ultimate clubs. If you are looking to buy discs or disc golf baskets, you can also get custom stamped discs for your school. So if you're at a school, maybe, kindergarten, grade 7. So when those grade 7s leave, then they can get a Frisbee with a custom stamped logo of your school. So they always have that to remember your school. So, nice memento. And like I said, I want to get this to you. So the Frisbee, the Flying Disc Week PDF, I'll get that out to you at some point, I guess an email or something. But if you wanted a customized PE workshop, let me know and I can help you definitely set that up. So my goal is to just try to get Frisbee in as many schools as possible. With a Frisbee club, you could also have like a Frisbee meet. So it'd be like a track meet, and it doesn't have to be all the disciplines. You could have a track meet or a Frisbee meet and have distance and self-cut flight might be the only 2. So it could be a lot of fun to just challenge different grades, different schools. You can do a lot with it. So these are just some of the resources. So agelessgame.com. That's the website that has all the disciplines and all the games. I'm looking into either building sort of a more mobile friendly website or an app. So you can actually go in, you can choose how many people you have, how many Frisbees you have, and then it gives you a list of the different games that you could actually play. Frisbee Rob, so all the information about the different programs and services I provide. There is a store on there, but if you actually want to buy discs, just message me. It's just so much easier to do it that way. And I can figure out where you're at, where I can connect you with somebody locally. Throw, Run, Catch, and Flying Disc Week, you'll find more information about these programs. And we'll make sure that we get the Flying Disc Week curriculum out to you. Frisbee Club is in development. I have a summer student working with me, so the next couple of weeks is going to be big, but the goal is to get Frisbee clubs in schools, churches, libraries, and community associations for now. And so you can have that connection, getting more community built, people of all ages trying it. And then throwing proficiency, so throw2.me. That's something that I worked on last year during COVID. So, if you're inside, if you have a small space in your backyard, or if you have a park, just really provides some different ways that you can actually get out and explore Frisbee. Even if you have a small space in your kitchen, there's different things you can do. One thing that we did as well, some group of guys that I know, we're all a little bit weird, and but we love it. And we were doing paper play. And so instead of, inside throwing a Frisbee doesn't work. And so we're literally trying to drop a piece of paper and see who can have their paper fly the furthest. we're challenging each other. It's just a way to stay connected and engaged. But just a great way to do things, when you're traveling at home. Mini disc is a great thing you can do inside as well. And so there's just a lot of really fun ways to explore Frisbee. So that's all that I have.
Awesome. Yeah, no, amazing. I think like the key, I guess, takeaway for me and something that I'm sort of discovering is, as I said, like sort of Frisbee takes off at our school is just the endless possibilities that there are with a Frisbee, like, and there's something for every kid, like you said, like for those kids that are good at throwing, it's there for catching, for running, like that there's so many different things that you can do. And yeah, I think as I guess, like people who are in at-home learning still, I know there's people around the world who are still like in lockdowns and things like that. Like you said, there's things that kids can be doing at home by themselves, or if you're back at school, you can be doing stuff in small groups or large groups, no matter the situation. Like you said, like it's a very accessible thing. Like the discs, like you said, are $10 for a decent disc, and you've got lots and lots of different options. So I'm sure that you'll be getting a lot of people reaching out to you on that email address really soon. There were a couple of questions. I'm just going to go back.
Yeah, I saw a question from Rich.
Yeah, freestyling. So
Rich, so yeah, a quick point. So Frisbee spin in two directions, either clockwise or counterclockwise. So this is important because when you actually learn to spin a Frisbee on your finger, counter or clock does make a difference. And so a really fun way to introduce this to kids is by twirling it. So they can either twirl it counter or clock, and they'll find out what's more comfortable to them. So there's not a better way. Because more people throw backhands typically, and more people are right-handed, like I think 90% of people are right-handed. So when you throw a right-handed backhand, the Frisbee actually spins spins clockwise. And so a lot of people, it's easier for them to throw clockwise throws. So that's probably why I think more people do clock. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's good to learn both directions, both spins, and it's just something as well that it's been really interesting just learning and introducing kids and asking them, think of a clock. And they're like, well, how many kids have a clock on the wall anymore? So just trying to get them thinking about that.
For sure. Yeah. So if there are any other questions for now, please just type them in the chat box. We just got another couple of minutes before we wrap this up. But if you do have other questions, or if you're watching this on replay at a later date, then you can contact Rob there on that email address, rob@frisbeerob.com. Are you on social media? People can they get you on social media?
Yeah, just Frisbee Rob. I was able to secure that, luckily.
Yeah. Got in early.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to, as we sort of wrap this up, I want to thank you so much, Rob, for giving up some of your time tonight to share with us. I know you're really passionate about Frisbee and getting it into schools, and it was a lot of fun to connect with you sort of last year when we did the podcast. And thank you again for coming on and doing a webinar for us. Thanks to all of the people that have joined us live today and for sharing your questions and letting us know a little bit about how you're using Frisbee at your school. I'm hoping to get Rob into my school next year here in BC. So if we make it happen, we'll definitely shoot out some videos or something over social media as we get back in person. I actually got my COVID shot today, so we're getting closer every day to getting things back to a little bit of normality.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been really fascinating. I actually didn't learn about a lot of this stuff until I was sort of at events talking to people. And so that's why I'm trying to provide resources, because there's just so many things that if I introduce it to somebody and they're not interested, great. But if they don't even know about it, then how will they even know what they're interested in?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I've noticed with my kids as well is, like that idea of invention. Like there is so much possibility in the kids. Like even when I've had them doing different challenges or different games using a Frisbee, like they'll be in the middle of it and then they'll just be like, well, what if we do this? And it's sort of like, yep, sure. Like go for it. Like it's, really, you can be as creative as you like with it. So, yeah, great. Thank you so much again, Rob. I'm gonna log this off. If you do have any questions for Rob, make sure to reach out to him via that email. I will make sure that any of the resources or anything that Rob is going to share with you get sent out to you via email as soon as I have them. I'll pass them on to everybody, and hopefully connect with everybody again soon. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks again, Nathan.